The night was silent, heavy with the weight of things unseen. Then, a sudden sound, a frantic rhythm, bare feet pounding against the dirt road. Fast, uneven, desperate. Breath sharp, shallow, pushing harder, faster. The only thought, escape, darkness. Stretched ahead, but fear chased from behind. Then, light. Blinding beams slashed through the night. The low roar of an engine, the metallic growl of something unnatural disturbing the peace of the land. The voices followed, urgent, rough, unfamiliar. Orders snapped like the crack of a whip. Faster. Don't let her get away. The van closed. In, its tires spitting dust. Shadows shifted inside, figures moving, preparing. A door swung open, and heavy boots hit the ground. Now. Grab her. The words sliced through the night. A body lunged forward, hands reaching, feet crushing the earth. Beneath them. But the runner knew what waited if the hands found her. The body obeyed no longer, it was the wind, weaving, dodging, slipping through their grasp. But fear gripped tighter than any hand ever could. A sharp sting burned against the skin, the wet warmth of blood trickling down. The wound didn't matter. Only one thing did, forward. Keep moving. Keep breathing. Keep running. The voice of the past, gentle yet firm, whispered in the mind. Never look back. Another step. Then another. Then, nothing, the ground vanished beneath her. The weight of her own body betrayed her, sent her tumbling. The rough kiss of dirt tore at her palms, her knees. A gasp, too late. Fingers wrapped around her wrist, strong, unyielding. A scream. Pure, raw, filled with everything left inside. It ripped through the trees, through the night, through the sky itself. She thrashed, kicked, scratched. But the grip tightened, pulling, dragging. A sound split the air, a thunderous crack, louder than the roar of the van, louder than the pounding in her chest. The hand loosened. The body behind it staggered. A groan, then silence, another shadow. Moved, this one faster, deliberate. No hesitation. A rough jerk, and the runner was no longer alone. The night swallowed them both, the van still roaring in the distance. The silence returned, but it was no longer the same. It carried whispers now, the breath of danger still lurking. A trembling grip clutched at fabric, eyes wide, chest rising. Too fast, too hard. The van screeched to a halt, voices sharp, angry, searching. A whisper, steady, calm, dangerous. Stay quiet, if you want to live. The van sped into the darkness, its tires screaming against the ground. The sound faded, swallowed by the night, but the air still carried the weight of danger. A sharp gaze followed its retreat, watching, memorizing. Nothing left behind but dust and silence. A trembling hand pressed against the earth, fingers digging into the dirt. Breath came in quick, uneven bursts. A face streaked with dirt and tears, eyes wide, unblinking. Wrists raw, deep red lines where ropes once bound too tightly. The body still shook, still trapped in the memory of hands that grabbed. Voices that threatened, a cage that almost never opened. A shadow moved closer. Steady, unhurried, watching. A crouch, a voice low and firm. You're safe, for now. A sharp flinch, a backward step, muscles tensed to flee. A moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fear. The eyes that had watched the van now held something else, patience, maybe. Not softness, not yet. A scarred hand rested against a worn beaded necklace, dark and smooth from years of wear. The pattern told a story, the weight of the beads carrying the wisdom of old villages. Strength carved in bone, in battle, in the quiet acceptance of responsibility. You got two choices, kid, run, or fight back. The words hung in the air. No urgency, no force, just a simple truth waiting to be grasped. A gaze met his, uncertain, questioning. Running had always been the answer. Running meant escaping, surviving. But running never ended. There would always be another van, another hand. Another locked door. A hard swallow. A decision sat heavy in the chest, unfamiliar but unshakable. For the first time, fighting back seemed possible. The path twisted and turned, narrow and hidden, carved by footsteps that knew the city better than the streets themselves. Shadows stretched long, watching, listening. Footsteps quickened, cautious, slipping through spaces where eyes did not wander. A rusted door stood at the end, its edges worn by time, its purpose known only to those who dared enter. A firm push, a heavy creak, and the world outside faded. Behind thick metal a body collapsed onto a wooden bench, breath ragged, shoulders trembling. The weight of the night, the chase, the hands that had grabbed and almost taken everything, pressed down like a storm refusing to pass. A cup landed in shaky fingers, cool against burning skin. The water swirled, untouched, the surface rippling with the weight of unspoken words. Across the room, sharp eyes never wavered, waiting, measuring. They take us in trucks. They sell us. The words barely formed, barely carried through the thick air, but they landed heavy. A grip tightened around calloused fingers. Who? Silence stretched, thick with fear and hesitation. Then, barely above a whisper. Rich men. Police. People were told to trust. A sharp inhale. A slow exhale. The fist that had clenched too tight loosened, but only slightly. They say the girls run away. They lie. They take them at night. They make them disappear. The cup still sat untouched, trembling hands now gripping the edge of the bench. The weight of words pressed heavier now, not just from the past, but from what was still to come. Not a hand lifted, fingers brushing against the wrist where a red stain still lingered. The ink had faded, but its meaning had not. That mark means I was next. The air shifted. It was no longer thick with fear. Something else settled in its place, something colder, sharper. A stance straightened, shoulders squared. Eyes locked onto the city that slept above, unaware of the sickness that spread in its shadows. We find them. We end this. The air carried the heavy scent of oil and metal, thick with the quiet hum of engines waiting to roar. Shadows moved between rusted containers, careful, slow, unseen. The weight of the night pressed against them, but the mission pushed harder. A row of trucks stood in silence, each one a cage on wheels. Eyes scanned the darkness, seeking the mark. Then, there it was. The black van. The same doors. The same wheels that had rolled into the night once before, carrying screams that never reached the sky. A small tracker landed in an open palm. We get close. We tag it. We leave. No questions. No hesitation. This was not a moment for doubt. This was a moment for action. The path ahead was tight, guarded, watching. Footsteps barely made a sound, slipping between gaps where eyes did not reach. A deep breath, a steady step. One more. Then another. The trembling hands had no time for fear now. A hand reached for the bumper, fingers moving fast, securing the small device beneath the metal. One motion, smooth, done. But something shifted, something unseen. A breath held, a body frozen. Eyes locked onto the inside of the van, wide, terrified. A silent scream, the door slammed shut. A whistle sliced through the air. A burst of sound. Sharp, urgent. Voices rose, boots pounded against the ground. They're here. The first strike came hard. A body collapsed. A second swung, fast and wild, but it met only air before falling with a heavy thud. Another rushed forward, fists clenched, heart hammering, striking back with all the fury of stolen voices. Then, the roar. Tires screeched, dust swallowed the air. The van surged forward, slipping into the night, slipping away. A gaze followed, fists tight, breath heavy. We have to go after them. A firm grip tightened against stiff fabric, the weight of rage pressing against the wall. A sharp gasp filled the space between them. Fingers dug into the collar, forcing the body higher, closer to the truth that had been hidden too long. Who's behind this? A choked sound, lips trembling, breath strangled by fear. Tell me. The name came, barely a whisper, but it was enough. The weight released, the body crumpling, hands clawing at the throat, desperate for air. The truth had been bought with force, and now it had a path. A world of gold and lies stretched ahead. The gates stood open, welcoming the ones who knew how to play the game. Men in silk, women in jewels, all gathered beneath a grand ceiling that hid sins darker than the night itself. Laughter floated, light and empty, masking the weight of the deeds beneath it. Eyes swept across the room, searching. Behind the doors, where the workers moved unnoticed, a hand gripped a uniform, pulling it over worn clothes. A cap slid low over a face that knew too much. Breath held steady, steps firm, blending in with the quiet army that served without question. A tray lifted, hand steady, heart wild. Voices hummed like restless bees, smooth words laced with something bitter. Glasses clinked, agreements sealed between sips of fine wine. Not business, not trade, something worse. Names passed between lips. Numbers exchanged like currency. Each deal another secret, each smile another mask. A quiet voice crackled to life in an unseen space. We go live in 3, 2, 1. The air shifted. Screens flickered. The hum of conversation broke. Images flashed, names, faces, transactions captured for all to see. Silence, then whispers. Then shouts. A chair scraped against the floor. A heavy step, a sudden retreat. A hand reached out, blocking the path. Not this time. The voice was steady, the stance unshaken. The body before it hesitated, then turned, but there was nowhere left to go. A wail split the night. Red and blue lights painted the golden walls. Injustice. The gates that once welcomed now stood as barriers. Heavy boots stormed the floor, hands grabbed wrists, and the ones who once whispered now begged. There was no escape. The game was over. The truth split the night wide open, tearing through the golden walls like a storm that had waited too long. Chaos followed. Tables crashed, glass shattered, silk and gold rushed for the exits, their stolen power useless now. Whispers turned to cries, masks of confidence shattered by fear. A desperate push toward the doors, but there was no escape. A single command cut through the panic. Get them. Weapons rose, blocking every way out. The promise of silence, permanent and deadly, hung heavy in the air. No one leaves alive. A fist moved before the first shot could. A crack, swift and brutal, sent the first man stumbling. Blood ran, a nose broken, a warning delivered. A fight erupted, fists and bodies colliding in fast, violent strikes. While the battle raged, trembling hands reached for cold metal. A line of locks, heavy and unyielding, held back the stolen voices trapped behind the doors. Fingers fumbled, heart pounded. 2 slow footsteps. Heavy. Fast. A sudden turn, a sharp breath. A reach. A dodge. A knee slammed forward, forcing the attacker back. Another breath, another twist of the key. The door groaned, then swung wide. Freedom poured out. Some ran, sobbing, gasping for air that no longer smelled of cages. Others stood firm, eyes fierce, ready to strike back. The hunted had become something new, something dangerous. A sound rose beyond the screams. A wail, distant at first, then closer. Red and blue lights cut through the dark. The law had finally woken up. We have to move now. The fight behind them faded. The sirens grew louder. The night opened its arms once more, swallowing 2 shadows as they vanished, unseen. The battle was over. But the war had just begun. The city woke to a truth it could no longer ignore. The names that once whispered in fear now echoed through the streets. The powerful, once untouchable, now stood with their hands bound, their eyes lowered. One by one, they were dragged into waiting vans, their wealth and status no longer shields against justice. The walls they built to hide their sins had crumbled, leaving nothing but the raw, ugly truth for all to see. From the shadows of captivity, voices rose. Girls stepped forward, blinking into the light, no longer afraid. Their stories, once dismissed, now carried weight. They spoke of stolen nights, of silent cries, of hands that held too tight and doors that never opened. The world listened. No one turned away. Families ran to embrace the ones they thought lost forever, tears falling onto shoulders that had carried too much pain for too long. But not every girl had someone waiting. Not every girl was ready to go home. The courthouse steps became a place of reckoning. A crowd gathered, voices merging into one, demanding justice for those who had vanished, for those who would never return. The names of the lost were spoken aloud, each one carried on the wind, a promise that they would not be forgotten. Beyond the noise, two figures stood at the edge of the city, watching as the sun stretched its golden fingers across the horizon. The night had passed. The battle had been won. A breath, long and steady, as the weight of the fight settled. It's over. A pause. A slow shake of the head. No. This was just one battle. A glance upward, searching, questioning. So? What now? A step forward. A voice steady. Sure, we keep fighting.